In this tutorial, I want to talk about annotating the basic types, that is, strings, floats, integers, and booleans. For annotating a string variable, we use :str and assign a string value to the variable. For a variable holding an integer value, we use the :int and assign an integer to the variable. For a variable holding floating point number, we use :float. And :bool is used for boolean valued variable. Here we assign the false to the variable connected. Here we annotate the type of the argument passed to the capitalized input function. We annotate the user input with the string type. Since we have annotated the type of argument passed to the capitalized input function, if we pass an integer to the capitalized input function, we will get an error. Actually, the editor will throw an error, a red line below the argument passed to the capitalized input function. So if we pass the integer 10 and run the code, we will get an error saying that int object has no attribute capitalized. Of course, if you pass a string instead of an integer, the error will disappear and the code will run successfully. And as a result, the first letter of the string passed to the capitalized input function will be capitalized. If I assign a floating point number to a variable of type integer, the editor will throw an error, saying that the expression of type float cannot be assigned to declared type int. However, I can assign a boolean value true or false to a variable of type integer, and the editor will not throw an error, because true and false can be considered 1 and 0 respectively. Fundamentally, boolean type can be considered a subtype of integer. As another example, if I assign a string to a variable of type float, the editor will throw an error. However, if I assign an integer value to a variable of float type, the editor will not throw an error anymore, because an integer can be considered a special case of floating point number. Also, we can assign the value true or false to a variable of type float, because boolean type is a subtype of integer and integer type is a subtype of float type. So we can consider boolean type a subtype of float. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel to not lose future videos on Python typings and type annotation.